This was the most winning car in the year that these teams competed. They won the Best of Show award, which means they won the most of the different competitions that are in the contest, and then whoever scores the highest ends up with the Best in Show award, which we borrow as a title from dog shows, actually. And this was state of the art at the time, and there are so many different ways to try to build the vehicle. And at this time, the approach was still, the best approach that people had discovered was to make a very lightweight vehicle and to make it with a three-wheel configuration. So we got one wheel in the back, and we call this a torque tube design. So the rubber band is inside. This one has an aluminum tube in the back, and the way that it's designed, one half of the tube in the back rotates, one does not, with two sets of bearings. And this gave really low friction and does an interesting thing. It allows you to take the length of the rubber band. Everybody gets 16 feet, so we come up with different ways to try and get the most power out of the rubber band and at the same time get the most speed. So on this design, this ring is used to wind up the rubber band. There are, it's about a 12-inch loop, which means with the 16 feet of rubber band, you get about 8 loops, we'd say. And that was kind of the state of the art at the time. So when you're doing a three-wheel layout, one of the neat things about it is the three-wheel layout automatically has this wheel which is pushing the force forward is in between the two wheels. And that means it tends to go nice and straight in between. And that's one of the advantages. Then this team did a really good job of getting the balance done. So this has a really good weight distribution. If you hold it near the middle, they have located all the other components. Right now the battery's missing. So if the battery was here, I think you'd see it was right in the middle. And they got the weight distribution to work really well, which is great. The frame is made out of carbon fiber tubes, and I believe these are tubes that are used for making a bow and arrow, for archery. And they're stiff and very light. And then the other components that they used were made by using a rapid prototyping, FDM parts. So this team took an approach with the wheel that is based on the idea of a racing bicycle. So if you take a look at a racing bicycle, the tires are very, very skinny, very thin, and they're hard, and they have a round section. So the tire is only touching on a very small spot, and that means that there's very little friction when this is moving ahead. And that's good when you're going straight, but they also realized that they needed a little bit more traction in the back. So they used two back here, and that meant that even though they have low friction, those two spots meant that the wheel didn't slip when the power went to the ground, and that means all of the energy is going forward. Now, a really clever thing they did is they set up the geometry of their steering, and I'll talk more about that in particular, but when these wheels turn, they do an interesting thing. Because of the combination of the camber that's put on the wheels, and then the caster that they put on, and what we call the kingpin trailing axis, when these wheels turn, they turn in such a way that this inner tire, which is a little bit smaller in diameter, it actually, when it's in turning mode, it touches on both of these wheels, which is really clever. They found a way to make it so when they're turning, it has more traction, but when they're going straight, it only is running on the outside wheel. Really smart idea. Now, another thing that this design did, which was kind of a breakthrough and has changed things ever since then, is that the Formula E rules basically say that you can have only 2 of the radio-controlled servos. In this case, one is used for steering, so this servo is controlling the steering in the front, and I think we can kind of expect everybody's going to probably use one servo for that. The other servo they've used and have been very clever, and they have a system so that when this servo moves, on the body of the vehicle itself, this little area slides, and it starts to provide friction against the wheel, which creates the method for the car to brake. But it also has this additional mechanism, and as this slides forward, it finally gets to a place that stops the rotation of this tube in the back. And so we would typically say this is a brake and this is a clutch. And that was a kind of breakthrough idea. I would say also the smarts to use the chassis, the frame of the vehicle, to also be the mechanism that slides with the brake. And that was a new thing. So from this point, we have seen a lot of people be successful by using the clutch more than the brake, because the way that the vehicle handles is very different. Now, the difficulty with the three-wheel layout and with this tube in the back is that this area is always a little bit unstable. And so when the vehicle takes a turn, there's a tendency for the vehicle to have weight back here because of this big mass, and it will tend to slide when it goes around. So their design to get the weight distribution so balanced is really a good way to make this layout be successful. And that's pretty much the design of this vehicle. They also did some really clever things to encase the cables. Cables are always a difficult thing to figure out how to manage on these cars. And what really I remember so much about this team is they were out testing their car almost every day. From about the middle of the project to the very end, they tested this and they really knew their car. They knew how to drive it really well, and that made a huge difference in the success of the team.
Great.